You wake at 3:33 a.m. and know immediately. It's a sign. Your heart races and your mind tells you something enormous is about to happen. You feel chosen, seen, connected to a thread that others miss. That feeling is a drug. It gives meaning to random moments. I have watched this pattern 100 times. I study minds that turned life into a scavenger hunt for meaning. They see coded messages in license plates, in mirrored clocks, in the tone of a stranger's voice. They translate coincidence into destiny. They call panic intuition. They call fear divine warning. This is not a cute quirk. It is an operating system. When someone lives by it, their whole decision-making tilts toward waiting. Waiting for the neon sign of the universe. Waiting for the perfect alignment. Waiting for a cosmic thumbs up before they move. I want to be ruthless and useful. I will map the machinery that makes this pattern so seductive. I will show the exact steps that convert ordinary anxiety into a spiritual narrative. I will show how that narrative becomes permission to avoid responsibility. I will show why the results are predictable and often devastating. By the end, you will know the first real action to break the pattern. Not a slogan, a practice, a tiny ritual that interrupts the machinery. You'll also be able to classify where you sit in this tribe of signal seekers. Do you check your phone for 11:11 and feel your fate shift when you see it? Do you only sleep easily if something aligns? If so, listen closely. The scene at 3:33 was the symptom. Now I need to dissect the disease. I will start with the X-ray. I will name how these people see themselves. I will show how self-image and behavior divorce from results. I will point to the contradiction they live in every day. And then I will show where that contradiction hides the real cost. Stay with me. The pattern looks spiritual and noble at first. Underneath, it is a slow-moving trap. What I uncover next will not comfort you. It will give you the clarity you need to change. That 3:33 moment smells noble to the person who lives there. They tell themselves they are awake. They say they feel the universe in ways others do not. I hear that language over and over. I'm more intuitive, they say. I listen to signs. It sounds humble. It performs humility. But when I peel the skin, I find an elaborate defense. They have a public persona and a private story. Publicly, they are the spiritual person who refuses to be ruled by market logic. They post quotes at sunrise. They explain manifesting in soft, confident phrases. They critique hustle culture from a distance. They claim they want alignment more than money. That stance wins a kind of moral applause. It protects them from blunt judgment. Privately, they tell a different story to themselves. At night, the inner voice is sharper. If I choose and it's wrong, I will have to live with the shame. If I take that job, I will prove I sold out. If I leave, I will be responsible for the fallout. Those inner sentences are fear wearing philosophical clothes. They are the engine of the waiting. The image they hold is two-layered. One layer says they are special. That layer comforts and inflates. The other layer says they are fragile. That layer freezes. The contradiction between special and fragile organizes behavior. It justifies an action. When money appears, the behavior splits. They speak of abundance and trust. They act with timidity. A small wind of doubt, and they fold. They will proclaim surrender to the universe and then micromanage signs. They will ask for confirmation and then reinterpret silence as deeper meaning. The inner logic is, if it was really for me, it will show up right. So they wait. They check clocks. They watch coincidences. They turn random events into pilot lights. They treat the world like a riddle to solve. That riddle gives them temporary relief. Every sign is a brief peace. But signs are not sustainable fuel. Let me show you daily scenes. You will see the split clearer. The person gets an email offering a freelance gig. They read it, then scroll for a number pattern. Did the timestamp match their master number? They think, if the timestamp is right, it's meant for me. If not, they set the email aside and wait for a clearer sign. Meanwhile, deadlines pass and their inbox grows. The world offered a door. They waited for fireworks. Another scene. A friend suggests a small investment opportunity. The person feels nervous. They sit in mediation to ask the universe. They check tarot threads and online forums. They wait for something external to make the decision appear moral and safe. They ultimately miss a modest, sane opportunity. Or, worse, they invest when a stray symbol appeared a feather, a repeated number, and lose money. They then search for signs of recovery instead of learning method. The mind is trained to chase validation, not competence. You ask, why do they interpret coincidences so strongly? Because their nervous system is wired to crave certainty without risk. Anxiety seeks patterns. The brain will conjure links to soothe this state. It is normal. It is evolutionary. But when that comfort system is paired with a spiritual narrative, it gains permission and authority. The person thinks, this is not my insecurity. This is cosmic intelligence. That is where the trouble deepens. I want to be blunt. Calling fear intuitive guidance is an elegant dodge. It externalizes responsibility. It gives the person moral cover. The universe told me beats, I was afraid. And once externalization is practiced, it generalizes. It moves from isolated choices into identity. The person stops being an agent. They become an interpreter. Interpretation becomes a full-time job. They spend hours researching the meaning of numbers, birds, and chance phrases. They scour forums for confirmation. They become specialists in reading signs. They become amateur prophets rather than decision makers. That skill set is expensive. It uses time, money, and emotional energy that could be invested in competence. There is an irony in their rhetoric about abundance. They preach, receive, and flow, but their posture toward resources is defensive. They fear loss. They fear being wrong. So they demand certainty. They mistake it for wisdom. Certainty is not wisdom. Certainty is avoidance. Wisdom tolerates discomfort and chooses anyway. This posture shifts how they relate to risk. Real risk is measured and managed. It can be quantified, planned, and rehearsed. The sign waiter treats risk like a moral verdict. If a sign doesn't arrive, the decision is immoral. If it does, it's moral. This binary is toxic. Now look at how they talk about other people. They admire true spiritual leaders and contemptuously categorize those who act aggressively in the market as materialistic. That moral posture allows them to avoid the risk of competence. It morally inoculates them against the possibility that someone who earns more simply practice choices consistently. The result is misplaced moral superiority. I have seen this play out in relationships. Someone will stay in a marriage because they saw a rainbow the day after a fight. They interpret the rainbow as validation that the relationship is the right karmic training. They remain. The rainbow becomes a lever to override a clear reality. The cost is emotional harm. I have also seen a different face. The person who interprets every small positive note as a cosmic green light and accepts every opportunity. At first it looks like courage, but the pattern is random acting disguised as divinely led spontaneity. They hop from false start to false start. No consistent skills grow. They confuse movement for progress. Let me tell you about Marcella. She is a real case I encountered often. She was offered a managerial role she had secretly wanted for years. She read the offer and felt a rush of anxiety. She asked for time. She waited for a sign. On the day she had to decide, she saw a car with the number 555 and took it as confirmation. She accepted. 3 months later, she hated the job. She was miserable. When results arrived low engagement, poor fit, she blamed the sign. She said she must have misread it. She waited for another sign to leave. 2 years passed. The opportunity cost was not just salary. It was professional momentum, learning, a chance to build confidence. The sign had become a scapegoat. This pattern of scapegoating is crucial. The sign provides cover when things fail. The sign misled me is safer than I chose badly. So the person doubles down on interpretation. They say they need clearer signs. They chase stronger signals. The cycle accelerates. There is a fiscal cost. That script is seductive because it simplifies moral calculus. It makes choices into signs. It replaces judgment with interpretation. And interpretation is comfortable work compared to accountable action. You might think this is all theoretical. Let me give you a financial picture to make it concrete. Consider Roberto. He had a modest nest egg of 20,000. He liked the idea of passive income. He also hated the idea of taking responsibility for learning about markets. He turned to spiritual indicators. He saw a small feather on his doorstep the morning he read a newsletter about a new token. He took the feather as a sign to fly and invested 90% of his savings. The token collapsed. Roberto lost 70% of his capital. After the loss, he searched for signals of recovery. He did not build a budget. He did not take a course on risk management. He did not call a financial advisor. He doubled down on the search for meaning. He became prey. This is not just money lost. This is learning deferred. The person trains themselves to avoid complexity. They remain on the perimeter of competence. The contradiction I keep returning to is sharp. They believe themselves more connected to the universe. Yet their lives show less clarity, less accumulation of skill, less stable progress. The posture of being chosen becomes a cover for incompetence. It produces the exact opposite of what they claim to want. Now at this point you might be feeling judged. Good. But hear me, my aim is not to shame. My aim is to make visible the pattern. Only visibility allows choice. There is a social cost too. Their relationships often become dependent on confirmation. They look for external validation instead of mutual negotiation. They stay in abusive dynamics because occasional signs reframe those dynamics as lessons. They spend energy cataloging coincidences rather than building boundaries. Long term, that belongs to a different kind of poverty, the poverty of self-trust. I want you to feel the severity of this pattern. This is not a harmless spiritual hobby. It is an operating system that shapes career, money, and love. And it has a predictable logic. Now, in the midst of this serious diagnosis, there are variations. Not everyone is trapped in the same way. Some modes are less harmful. Others are quietly destructive. The next part will map those internal types. I will describe 4 portraits you will recognize immediately. If you think you are immune, you probably belong to one of these types. If you recognize yourself, do not look away. Your type maps how the pattern behaves in your life. It shows where the pressure points are. In the next section, I will name them and show how each one creates its own brand of ruin and its own path out. But before I go, one small note. I'm building a place to share these cases. This channel is new and I need help reaching 1,000 subscribers. If this diagnosis is landing, subscribe and tell me your city and country in the comments. It helps the work and keeps this conversation alive. Thank you. Now the types. I will start with the one that looks the most harmless but is very efficient at stealing time. The first portrait is the numerology addict. I'll show you her day, her belief, and the cost. The second portrait is more social and seductive. The third is the one that stops life. The fourth is the most painful because it hides behind legitimate suffering. Each will be a mirror. Which one will you see yourself in? They all tell a similar origin story. I just noticed patterns, they say. I learned to listen. But the way fear dresses itself differs. The faces of the pattern are distinct. I will show you 4 of them. You will see how each thinks, how each behaves, and how each builds a private ecosystem of avoidance. I will not be gentle. I will be accurate. The first face is the numerology compulsive. She worships patterns and numbers. She lives by mirrored clocks and recurring phone digits. When she wakes at 11:11, she feels confirmed. Her day starts and ends with brief ceremonies. She will spend an hour cross-referencing a number with an online meaning. She believes numbers are a code. That belief organizes her hours. A day with her is small rituals. She checks her phone every hour. She photographs license plates. She bookmarks pages about angel numbers. When a bill is due, she looks at the date and thinks about whether the number feels like a blockade or a blessing. If a sequence repeats, she experiences relief. It buys her peace. But peace is not the same as action. Her core story is, numbers are the universe talking to me. That story gives two things. It gives grand meaning. It also gives procrastination. She will avoid meetings until a time feels right. She will delay calls because the clock is not aligned. Money management becomes interpretative. Her invoices go unpaid until the hour feels permitted. Years pass in small pauses. The consequence is slow professional erosion. She misses deadlines. She loses clients. She blames the world for being off rhythm. She remains convinced the rhythm will realign and rescue her. The rescue rarely comes. If you are her, admit it. This is not spirituality. It is ritualized avoidance. The second face is the coincidence collector. He stitches unrelated events together into a narrative. He keeps a mental ledger of confirmations. He thinks, I thought of Maya, then Maya called. Therefore the universe supports my next move. He collects narratives and builds plans around them. His decisions feel poetic. People find him charismatic. A day with him feels cinematic. He will tell a story about a song that played at the right moment. He will explain why a parking spot, a coffee order, and a passing billboard meant he should call his ex. It is intoxicating. It feels like destiny. But narrative is not a strategy. His belief is, there are no coincidences, only confirmations. That belief is functionally identical to a coin flip masquerading as destiny. He will act impulsively on a chain of symbols and then attribute success to cosmic favor. When things go wrong, he says the universe was testing him. He rarely learns method. He learns to narrate. The cost is unpredictability. Relationships wobble. Financial choices are inconsistent. Momentum is episodic. The collector tends to be admired in social circles for their romantic story-making, but privately they face repeated instability. The third face is the cosmic procrastinator. This one is the most paralyzing. He will avoid commitments until the definitive sign arrives. He files away opportunities like unstarted novels. He postpones critical phone calls. He wants the universe to hand him a map with an arrow that says, go now. A day with him is an inventory of near misses. He will not accept a job because he hasn't received a sign. He will not end an abusive relationship because he waits for an unmistakable message. He tolerates discomfort with a story. When it is right, the universe will tell me. So he waits and waits. His central belief is, when it's time, the universe will tell me beyond doubt. That belief is a sentence for suspended life. The cost is measurable: stalled careers, depleted savings, relationship debt. Two things make this especially dangerous. First, minor signs can be manufactured or misread, creating false decisions. Second, the habit of waiting makes it harder to choose without signals later. The muscle of choice atrophies. The fourth face is the spiritual anxious. This one is painful to describe because it blends genuine suffering with misattribution. She experiences panic, physical symptoms, and intrusive thoughts. Her body alerts her loudly. She interprets these alarms as spiritual warnings. She calls physical tightness an energetic purification. She equates distress with divine communication. A day with her is full of bodily metaphors. A headache is a message. A stomach ache is a clearing. She confuses dysregulation with insight. Her belief is, my physical fear is higher guidance. That belief makes anxiety sacred. She treats therapy like sacrilege because deep work might remove the very symptoms she uses to feel spiritually chosen. The consequences for her are tragic. She avoids appropriate care. She stays in their internal loop because the loop provides meaning to the suffering. Instead of learning practical coping skills, she waits for signs that the cleansing is finished. She pays for crystals and rituals and explanations because they validate her symptom set. Her actual nervous system remains untreated. You might ask, do these types exist in isolation? Rarely. Most people are hybrids. I have met someone who is a numerology compulsive and a procrastinator. Another person was a coincidence collector, then she committed to acting within 7 days. She chose a small, low-risk career test. It was not cosmic. It was a controlled experiment. The result was not miraculous. It was instructive. She learned she could choose, and the world did not punish her decision. That tiny move rewired more than therapy alone did. Her story is a model. It shows 2 things. First, the types are not fate. Second, the same instrument can disrupt them. A simple ritual of decision that emphasizes responsibility over proof. I want to outline how each type can use that instrument. For the numerology compulsive, I suggest a time box. Choose a decision deadline that ignores numbers. Commit publicly. Train the brain to accept that choice does not need cosmic punctuation. Practice small regular commitments. Keep receipts of action. For the coincidence collector, create a logic check. When a coincidence tempts you, run it through a competence filter. Ask, what practical skill will this choice build? If none, postpone. Convert romance into experiment. Test outcomes for 3 months. For the procrastinator, break decisions into 15-minute tasks. Choose the smallest actionable step and do it on a fixed day, independent of signs. Repeated micro-actions rebuild decisional muscle. For the spiritual anxious, treat the body as data, not as oracle. See a clinician. Use breathing protocols. Learn to separate somatic alerts from moral messages. The danger is sacredness of symptom. Reclaim the body through care. I say these things not to remove meaning. I say them to preserve it. There is room for wonder in a responsible life. The universe can feel alive without doing your decision-making. Wonder need not be a substitute for competence. Each type also needs accountability structures. I insist on external constraints for a time. A friend, a coach, a calendar. Grave choices require clear timelines. If you are used to signs, a calendar is an act of faith in your own agency. It is a different kind of devotion. You may be resistant. I hear it. You fear that choosing without proof is arrogance. You fear you'll hurt others. You fear being wrong. Those fears are not to be dismissed. They are to be engaged. Engage them with tools, not metaphors. Track outcomes. Learn. Iterate. I want to give you a phrase to repeat when the old script begins. Say it aloud. I am responsible now. That sentence is small and non-dramatic. It is not a slogan. It is a recalibration. Say it when you feel the itch to wait. Say it when a coincidence looks persuasive. Say it when anxiety hollows you. It anchors. If you are watching this and feel defensive, that is a sign you are inside the pattern. Not a condemnation. A fact. The next move is choice. Not perfection. Not rejection of spirit. Just a different posture. Before I close this section, I want to warn you about a common trap. Many people try to replace waiting with new rituals. They swap one set of rituals for another. They go from reading numbers to charting vibes by apps. The trap is believing ritual equals change. Ritual helps, but only when it scaffolds responsibility. Without accountability, ritual becomes a new superstition. We have to be precise. The aim is to translate spiritual sensitivity into functional wisdom. That means learning to tolerate uncertainty, to cultivate competence, and to act despite fear. It means learning to treat signs as data, not destiny. In the next part 1 will show the hidden law that binds these types together. I will reveal the mechanism that turns their postures into predictable results. I will not soften the truth. Once you understand the law, you will see why the pattern is not mysterious or mystical. It is mechanical, and mechanical processes can be changed. Which type are you? That question is not an accusation. It is a tool. Name your pattern. The name lets you see the lever. The lever is small. The pull is internal. But the pull is enough to redirect the current of your life. The next section explains exactly how. I want to be precise about the machine that runs this pattern. I call it the law of displacement of responsibility. The name is blunt because the mechanism is blunt. It moves the burden of choice away from you and places it on an imagined external authority called the universe. The result looks spiritual. It feels righteous, but it functions as an avoidance system. It starts small. A fear surfaces. Fear of being judged. Fear of failing. Fear of shame. You notice it as unease rather than a clear thought. You search for relief. The mind, clever and hungry for calm, offers a shortcut. Look for proof. Find a sign. If the world confirms, you are off the hook. If the world does not confirm, you are off the hook. Either way, responsibility is displaced. That displacement has a predictable structure. First, a sensation, then an interpretation, then a search, then a temporary relief, then a habit. The pattern repeats until you no longer recognize you are the origin of your own choices. The universe becomes the chosen scapegoat. It is tidy. It is moralizing. It is addictive. What I want you to see is that this is not mystical. It is mechanical. The law works because of three human capacities combined: pattern seeking, threat avoidance, and meaning making. We are built to connect dots. We are built to avoid risk. We are built to make stories about our place in the world. When those capacities team up, they produce precision in survival tasks. But when they team up with avoidance, they produce tricks. Here is the flow in one sentence. Threat prompts pattern search. Pattern found equals relief. Relief reinforces the search behavior. Over time, the search becomes the behavior. Decision is deferred in favor of interpretation work. Time, attention, and opportunities are consumed by translation, not action. Let me give you a concrete chain. Someone sends you a job offer. Instead of evaluating scope, pay, and logistics, you ask, is this a sign? You look at the timestamp, the day of the week, the weather outside. You remember a dream. You scroll forums. You wait for a number on the clock. Each mini-task feels meaningful. Each one reduces anxiety for a minute. But the hour passes. The offer expires. You learn not how to decide. You learned how to convert anxiety into ritual. That is the first misalignment. Action requires competence. Interpretation requires obsession. Interpretation is cheaper emotionally because it shields you from the possibility of shame. It is softer to say the universe told me no than to say I decided poorly. There is a second function of the law that matters for money. When you treat the world as a riddle to be decoded, you stop treating it as a system to be mastered. Financial competence is a practice. It demands rules, rehearsal, error analysis, humility about risk. Signs offer a bypass. They promise moral certainty where only probabilistic thinking exists. A sign feels like moral approval. A spreadsheet does not. I have watched this in clients again and again. One would spend hours looking for validation and minutes learning risk management. The result is predictable, impulsive moves at the whiff of coincidence. Paralysis when no coincidence appears. Loss that is then framed as spiritual misunderstanding rather than a learning opportunity. The law protects appetite for avoidance while eroding the skill needed to fix what went wrong. Now the law has another phase that makes it particularly insidious: selective memory. When people double down on signs, they also selectively archive successes and mislabel failures. They keep the hits and expunge the misses. If a coincidence precedes a good outcome, it becomes proof. If a coincidence precedes a bad outcome, it becomes misinterpretation. The narrative cleans itself. The person remains in their comfort zone of interpretation rather than correction. This selective memory acts like an account ledger that never balances because entries are allowed to shift categories. The person can claim moral innocence perpetually. I was guided. I received signs. Those phrases are shelters. They sound noble in public. They function as absolution in private. There is a social component as well. Saying the universe told you something is persuasive. It places you on a moral high ground. It also immunizes you from critique. If someone points out a practical failure, you can respond with spiritual language. I was testing my path, you might say. The critique cannot land because it is translated into a different register. That register is immune to standard accountability. But the law does not stop at escape. It also produces a feedback loop with the world. People act from avoidance. The market and relationships respond. Compound interest is not impressed by moral stories. A market will reward repeated correct choices over time. Meanwhile, the sign searcher waits for a cosmic permission slip. That slip is rare by definition. Markets move while the seeker deciphers. Momentum passes. Time is the quiet thief. There is another expression of the law I need to mark. It turns small vulnerabilities into a market for exploitation. When you publicly proclaim that signs guided your financial moves, you become a target for those who sell translation. We'll interpret the signs for you, they say. Join this exclusive group. Get signals. In the absence of competence, people will purchase certainty. I have seen people blow money on courses that promise to teach them how to read universal patterns. It is a transfer of responsibility packaged as empowerment. You might be thinking I am hostile to meaning. I am not. There is sacredness in meaning. There is room for wonder. The law is damaging because it elevates the mechanics of meaning above the work of competence. It turns interpretation into an end. It replaces apprenticeship with prophecy. So how do we spot the law in action? There are clear markers. 1. You refuse to accept the possibility of being wrong. 2. You treat coincidence as moral proof. 3. You substitute translation for training. 4. You keep repeating that a lack of sign indicates the world is not yet ready, rather than seeing that delay as information needing action. Let me give you 2 profiles to anchor this. Marcella, whom I mentioned earlier, accepted a managerial role because of an impulsive sign. She later hated the job. Instead of assessing the role and her fit, she waited for another sign to justify leaving. 2 years passed. She lost momentum. That momentum cannot be reclaimed in a neat spiritual transaction. Skills require practice. Months lost are months not invested. Roberto invested 90% of his savings after finding a small feather near his door on the morning he read about a new token. The feather comforted him. It was the universe's whisper. He lost 70% of his capital. Afterwards, he scoured the internet for signs of recovery. He ignored basic financial triage. He did not call a financial advisor. He did not open a book. He chased meaning rather than method. Notice the commonality. Marcella's and Roberto's problems are not primarily about wrong outcomes. They are about the bypassing of process. They were trading the hard work of competence for the soft refuge of interpretation. This law also has a temporal effect. It elongates indecision. It makes deadlines elastic. When you expect signs, time becomes a waiting room. Waiting rooms are littered with lost opportunities. In a professional context, this looks like stalled projects, late pitches, and faded partnerships. In personal finances, it looks like missed investments and depleted savings. In relationships, it looks like staying in situations that require action rather than symbolism. There is a moral grammar to the law worth exposing. People under its sway often make grand moral claims. They refuse greed. They reject hustle culture. They claim to seek alignment. Those claims are often sincere, but they also operate as armor. If you tell a client you prefer alignment over money, you are preemptively protected from scrutiny about whether you actually built a livelihood. Moral position becomes a shelter against practical evaluation. The law also fabricates a double standard. It moralizes restraint while excusing inertia. You can condemn ambition out loud and then avoid the labor that would produce prosperity in private. The self-congratulation of being spiritual protects you from the uncomfortable work of skill acquisition. We call this moral credentialing. It feels good because it signals virtue. But virtue without craft is just renunciation. Now, I want to be clear about agency. The law is powerful but not undefeatable. Mechanisms can be reversed because they are mechanical. The same pattern-seeking capacity that finds signs can be retrained to track outcomes. The same meaning-making capacity that builds narratives can be redirected to build hypotheses and tests. The same threat avoidance that shies away from failure can be engaged in small, controlled exposures. That is why my interventions are practical. The planet of meaning does not collapse if you choose accountability. The cosmos does not stop whispering if you ask for evidence in the form of results. You do not become unspiritual by learning to evaluate a job offer with a checklist. You do not become cynical by using a budget. The law of displacement thrives because it masks avoidance as holiness. To break it is to remove the mask. To break it is to accept that discomfort is part of growth. To break it is to become responsible even when the outcome is uncertain. You may resist that idea. You may prefer the moral shelter. That resistance is instructive. It tells me you are comfortable in the economy of interpretation. It tells me responsibility feels costly. It tells me the nervous system is used to receiving solace from signs. Ask yourself now, what decisions in your life have you postponed until the sign appears? How much time has passed while you decoded life? That question is not rhetorical. It is a diagnostic. The answer will show you where the law is operating. Understanding the law of displacement of responsibility matters because it allows us to see the pattern as a structure, not a mystery. Once you see the structure, you can interfere. Once you see the mechanism, you can design micro-interventions that shift the feedback loop. That is the promise and the practical value of naming this law. In the next section, I will show the loop in action. I will narrate how this law turns thoughts into a relentless cycle of self-sabotage. I will trace the cycle across money, work, and relationships. You will see how predictable and ruthless the pattern is. You will see why people who worship signs often end up waiting for a miracle while the world moves on. And then I will show how that cycle can be recognized and interrupted. What follows is the anatomy of the loop itself. The loop is simple to describe and cruelly efficient in practice. It runs in 4 steps and repeats until the system collapses. First, indecision. Second, anxiety. Third, external confirmation seeking. Fourth, action taken on shaky interpretation. Then repeat. Each cycle deepens the pattern and narrows available outcomes. I want to take you through the loop in 3 distinct contexts: career, finance, and intimate relationships. Each scene will reveal the same skeleton beneath different clothing. Start with career. Imagine a competent professional who wants a promotion. The person reads the offer but hesitates. Instead of evaluating competencies and negotiating terms, they ask, "Is this the universe's timing?" Anxiety rises. The mind searches. It checks clocks. It looks for repeating numbers. It notes a song that played the morning of the offer. The song becomes a totem. The person accepts or declines based on the totem. The outcome then arrives. If it is good, the totem is minted as proof. If it is bad, the person reinterprets the totem as misunderstood or misread. The crucial point is this: the skill of negotiation and the feedback of a market response were never exercised properly. Momentum is lost. Marcella is an example. She accepted a managerial role because she saw 555 on the dashboard the day she decided. 3 months later, she was miserable. She attributed the misery to misinterpretation. She waited for a sign to leave. I met her 2 years later. Her professional trajectory had stalled. The job that could have been a crucible of learning became a trap. The loop had produced false moral cover and real opportunity cost. Now finance. The rules are less forgiving here. Financial systems compound gains and losses. They punish irrational concentration. Yet the loop gleefully ignores those rules because the immediate relief is emotional, not strategic. Roberto's story is representative. He had a modest nest egg. A feather appeared on his doorstep the morning he read about a new token. He felt the universe nudge him. He invested 90% of his savings into a crypto play. The market crashed. He lost 70%. That should have triggered a study plan, debt triage, and conservative repair. Instead, he searched for signs of recovery. He joined groups promising to decode cosmic patterns and investment timing. The predator market loves that person. The loop had transformed his need for certainty into prey. Here is the core. Losses that could teach are converted into requests for stronger evidence. The person says, "I misread the sign," and so the search intensifies. The permission substitutes for judgment. Permission is easier than accountability. Permission becomes a new currency. But the loop is not merely a sequence of actions. It is a learning algorithm that trains the person's identity. Each time the person acts on signs instead of skill, the identity solidifies. I am a person who waits for the universe. That identity organizes future attention. It filters experience through a confirmation bias. The person stops learning to make choices. They learn to collect proof. This self-training is the most insidious effect. We tend to think of habits as surface behaviors. This habit re-sculpts agency. It makes indecision habitual. It rewires the nervous system to look outward for moral sanction. People develop a taste for absolution. They prefer absolution to competence. The loop also has a social ecology. People who perform spiritual coherence often congregate. They praise one another's patience and faith. Social reinforcement is another layer of insulation. When a forum validates that a missed opportunity was simply not in sync, the person gains social cover. The loop becomes a communal ritual, and then predators arrive. When a community prizes signs over expertise, markets form that sell meaning. There are signal services, readings, and paid groups that promise clearer signs. Money flows from those who lack financial literacy toward those who sell certainty disguised as spiritual translation. The loop thus creates its own economy. The reinforcing mechanism works like this. A person suffers loss. They feel shame. The shame is unbearable. The community offers compassion, but also interpretation. A sign interpreter promises to decode the universe and relieve shame. The person pays. They receive new ritualistic practices. For a while they have answers. For a while shame is mediated. But nothing structurally changes. The loop continues. This explains why the pattern persists even among intelligent people. Intelligence is not the antidote. Intelligence can be repurposed to justify avoidance. Clever minds become better at rationalizing. They build elaborate interpretive systems to defend the original avoidance. That is why simple behavioral interventions often work better than long conversations about belief. Let me show you how the loop breeds unpredictability and precisely measured losses. A competent person practicing skill building will show slow, steady improvement. They will miss sometimes, but the distribution of outcomes allows for correction. A sign-based actor will have spikes, moments of apparent fortunate alignment followed by deep troughs. The variance is higher. The long-run mean is lower. Consider Raphael, who used to gamble on intuitive hunches. Over a few years he had small wins that made him visible as lucky. People admired him. He took it as evidence of destiny. Then a single collapse erased his cushion and his reputation. He did not rebuild via skill. He doubled down on deeper signs until his network frayed. The loop had turned charisma into instability. We must also talk about the emotional labor this loop consumes. Interpretation is time-consuming. It uses attention that could be invested in learning. It consumes conversation. People recount their signs in detail, and a surprising amount of human energy is given to cataloging coincidence. This cataloging produces a kind of showmanship. Someone always has a story about the feather, the license plate, the mirrored clock. The story functions as identity, as proof of spiritual sensitivity, but it also crowds out practical skill building. The cycle is also exhausting because it never truly resolves doubt. Signs provide momentary relief, but if the person depends on signs for important choices, doubt returns quickly because the world reacts in complex ways. The person is then in a perpetual search mode. Anxiety returns as soon as the sign fails to produce unambiguous results. The satisfaction is transient. I have encountered people who treat learning as a spiritual bypass. After a financial loss, they will spend months on ritualistic practices and forums instead of taking a course on investing or meeting a financial planner. Their emotions feel soothed. Their balance sheet does not. The loop makes suffering meaningful, but not manageable. This loop also creates a powerful psychological defense against shame. Consider the moment after a bad choice. The sign seeker can say, "I was misled." Misleading can be blamed on an external force. There is no admission. "I made a bad call." That is the core protective function. It preserves self-esteem in the short run. It corrodes it in the long run. Now, let me be generous. I have seen two alternative moves out of the loop that actually work. Both are small and mechanical, and both are designed to rewire habit. First move, time box decisions. When a choice arises, set a firm deadline and a discrete set of criteria for evaluation. Treat the choice like an experiment. You will act, measure, and adjust. This replaces interpretive theater with iterative learning. It rebuilds decisional muscle. Second move, competence filter. Before you act on a sign, ask a tactical question. What skill will this move build? If the answer is nothing, delay action and convert it into a test. If the answer is something instrumental: networking, financial literacy, product development, then act with a plan. This converts romance into experiment. These moves are small, but they weaken the loop. They shift value from meaning to method. They also change the reward structure for the nervous system. Time boxes and competence filters produce feedback. They give the brain reliable signals that are not merely temporary comforts. Over time, the brain learns that action plus feedback is safer than ritualized proof. That is why I say the loop is a learning algorithm gone haywire. The same faculties that evolved to help us survive are trained to protect us from shame instead. The pattern organizes an entire life around avoidance. If you are inside this system, awareness alone will not be enough. The loop is self-sustaining. You need external constraints, small experiments, and public commitments. You need to prove to yourself that your choices can be made without celestial telegrams. You need to practice choosing badly and surviving. You may be thinking, this sounds brutal. It is brutal, but it is also merciful. When the loop breaks, you gain time, competence, and dignity. When the loop continues, you gain stories. Stories are not the same as results. In the next section, I will trace what happens when the loop runs for years. I will show the accumulation, the slow erosion of savings, the missed career ladders, the relationship debt. I will describe the point of rupture when waiting has a cost too high to ignore and the fork that appears. One path deepens the illusion. The other path requires a hard recalibration of agency. That fork is where lives either get worse or start to get better. I will tell you how that fork looks from the inside. If the loop runs long enough, it stops being theoretical and becomes materially visible. The costs compound, not metaphorically, literally. Earnings not accrued, skills not practiced, relationships weakened, savings eroded. The world, indifferent to moral narratives, records the outcomes. I want you to imagine accumulation not as interest, but as erosion in reverse. Each avoided decision is a tiny erosion. Each moment spent decoding signals is a minute not spent practicing. Weeks become months. Months become years. The person wakes up one day and recognizes the pattern as an indictment. They feel cheated. They feel foolish. That recognition can be lethal emotionally, or it can be catalytic. There is a moment that repeats in my practice. It begins with a mundane inventory. Open the bank app. Look at the balance. Notice there is no emergency fund. Check the calendar. Realize you are 3 years behind your peers on a career ladder you once thought you would climb. That inventory produces a new sensation, a sharp, existential cold. That is the point of rupture. Enrique reached that point at 43. He had spent a decade following numbers and signs. He had reasoned himself into waiting. He had justified each postponement as being in tune rather than being frightened. When he tallied his life, the result was painful. No career identity, no savings, and the same apartment. He told me he felt betrayed by the universe. He believed his faith had been sincere. He also admitted he had been waiting. That admission was the pivot. The pivot has two directions. One is deeper into the mythology. The other is toward responsibility. The first route, she learned negotiation. In a year, she had momentum and a reserve. The loop broke not because she discovered new spiritual truth. It broke because she practiced agency. This is crucial. Ruptures are not always dramatic. They are often small, stubborn, and cumulative. A single honest step done consistently can invert a lifetime of avoidance. But the rupture is emotionally costly. You will meet shame. Shame is the friction that makes change possible. Without friction, the person can remain in pleasant illusions. With friction, the person feels the heat of correction. Shame will arrive with thoughts like, "I wasted years." That thought is true. It is also salvific. It can be used. Use it as data, not as identity. There are practical markers that tell you are at collapse. 1. Your network has not matured because you are not building skills to add value. 2. Your income is unstable because you traded consistency for waiting for the universe. 3. Your health shows signs of chronic stress because anxiety was your default orientation. 4. Your relationships have a pattern of dependence on signs rather than mutual negotiation. At the collapse point, you have a choice. You can double down on the interpretive apparatus, or you can begin repair. Repair begins by reclaiming responsibility. That word sounds heavy. It is heavy, but it can be unbundled into small actions. First, inventory. List the decisions you have postponed. Name them, size them, rank them by cost. Second, choose one small, low-risk experiment. Time box it. Third, commit publicly. Accountability short-circuits the law of displacement. Fourth, treat outcomes as data. If the experiment fails, analyze, adjust, and iterate. People resist these steps because responsibility lacks the rhetorical glamour of cosmic interpretation. It is prosaic. It is small. It is also generative. Responsibility accumulates skill. Skill creates options. Options create dignity. Dignity dissolves the need for external absolution. Not everyone who hits collapse chooses repair. Many will seek new rituals. They will chase clearer signs and pay others to read the cosmos. This route can be expensive financially and morally. It is often preferable because it preserves a sense of spiritual identity. It is less threatening than accountability. The risk with this route is that it institutionalizes avoidance. The person ends up with a denser system of meaning and the same practical poverty. We must also examine what repair looks like in the social realm. People who once relied on signs to stay in relationships must now learn hard boundaries. The cosmic sanction that justified staying is replaced with a pragmatic test. Does this relationship produce consistent respect and safety? If not, end it. If yes, invest. That is not romance without wonder. It is romance grounded in concrete needs. Financial repair is often the most technical. It demands tree-off. It demands budgeting, literacy, and outside help. It is not glamorous. It is effective. It requires the person to move from interpretation to method. The nervous system will resist. It will whisper that this is empty. That whisper must be acknowledged and then ignored. Practice calms the system. Professionally, repair requires experiment. It requires setting micro goals and measuring outcomes. If you are waiting for a perfect alignment, you will never build a portfolio. If you set a 3-month test offer to do a small paid project, then you obtain feedback and evidence. This evidence is the language the world responds to. Now, let us be precise about forgiveness. You will have to forgive yourself for the years spent waiting. Forgiveness is not sentimental. It is functional. It clears psychological space so you can do the work. But forgiveness should not be confused with absolution. Forgive, then act. That is the sequence. Many people reverse it. They seek absolution before changing. That fails. Another reality. Changing the pattern does not secure you against uncertainty. You will still fail. You will still be wrong. But you will fail with method. You will be wrong with data. You will have resources to adjust. You will not be left adrift in a sea of reinterpretation. I want to close this section with a practical image. Imagine your life as a boat. Signs are little flags on the shore. They can be beautiful. They can help sometimes. But sailing requires oars, a map, and the willingness to row against the current. The law of displacement teaches you to wait on the shore for the flag to wave you onward. The repair teaches you to pick up the oars and row toward a destination, watching the flags, not waiting on them. If you are listening and this sounds like the shape of your life, accept the difficulty. The fork is real. The first step is banal and brave. Choose one small decision you have postponed and commit to acting within 7 days. Do not wait for a sign. Choose. Act. See, that is the beginning of reorientation. In the next part 1, we'll describe the precise techniques that build the alternative posture, the ritual of unsignaled decision, micro-experiments, accountability architectures, and how to treat intuition as data rather than diktat. I will also give scripts and sequences you can use immediately. If you are ready to stop blaming the cosmos, what follows will be the manual you need. The change begins with a simple reversal. Instead of waiting for the universe to hand you a neon sign, I ask you to act first and watch what the world does next. That is the pivot. It sounds small. It is not easy, but it is precise. I call the new posture responsible co-creation. It is not mystical language. It is a behavioral program. You choose, you act, you measure, you adjust. You trade interpretive theater for iterative experiments. The goal is to make decision-making a muscle again. I will give you a name for the first practical unit, the decision micro-loop. It has 4 steps. Step 1. Identify the smallest decision you are avoiding. Step 2. Set a 7-day action window. Step 3. Define 2 clear metrics. Step 4. Publicize the experiment. Repeat. This loop rebuilds the habit of choosing. Let me be concrete. Pick a small, low-risk choice. It could be a 30-minute paid test project, a call to one professional contact, or opening a basic brokerage account with $100. Small means survivable. Small means data. If you do this, you will get feedback you can use. One core practice in the decision micro-loop is time boxing. I teach people to box time like it is sacred. When a decision appears, you give it a deadline: 48 hours if small, 7 days if meaningful. You also give it a clear, measurable success criterion. Did I get a reply? Did I sign a contract? Did I reduce my anxiety by X%? Treat the decision as an experiment, not a rite of divination. The second practical tool is the competence filter. Before you act on any sign or intuition, ask, what skill will this move develop in me? If the answer is none, do not commit. Convert it to a test instead. If the answer is clear networking, sales, coding, then act with a learning plan. This single filter stops a lot of ritualized missteps. I teach a short script to use in the moment of temptation. Say aloud, will this build skill or soothe anxiety? Pause. Then write the answer in 3 words. If it is skill, outline the next 3 steps. If it is soothing, delay and assign a test instead. Saying it breaks the trance. Saying it moves you from story into procedure. Accountability is the third pillar. The nervous system that learned to wait for signs will resist private commitments. It needs external pressure. Make one commitment public. Send a message to a colleague. I'm testing X over the next 7 days. I'll report back on Friday. Or create a tiny contract with a friend. Payment helps. Even a small bet increases follow through. I build a simple accountability architecture for clients. Step 1. Identify the experiment. Step 2. Pick one external witness. Step 3. Set a financial or reputational stake. Step 4. Schedule a check-in. The architecture is boring. That is the point. Boring works. You will meet shame when you start this. Expect it. Shame is the emotional residue of avoidance. It will arrive as litany. I wasted years. Let the statement be data. Say, I wasted years. Then add, I will do one micro experiment this week. Transform lament into action. That small pivot changes the nervous system faster than half a year of pep talk. Now I will give you the full ritual of the unsignaled decision. I have taught it to anxious. For each week, list 3 targeted skills to move by 1%: networking, writing, spreadsheet fluency, negotiation. Block 90 minutes each weekday for focused work on one skill. Make the time non-negotiable, like a medical appointment. Over months, those 1% moves compound. This is how you turn choices into capital. Another interference to dismantle is the sign-seeking checklist. People who wait for signs often have internal lists of musts, a certain number, a symbol, an emotional state. I instruct clients to create a sign lid. A sign lid is a checkbox that reads, "I will not use coincidences to justify this choice until I complete the experiment." Stick that note on your desk. It is a small physical cue that collapses performative rituals. You will resist with sophisticated arguments. Expect phrases like, "But what if my intuition is telling me something?" I agree, intuition exists, but it is recognizable. The voice of anxiety sounds like drama. The voice of intuition is quiet. Intuition sits. Anxiety narrates. The rituals above teach you to distinguish sitting from narrating. The nervous system also loves symbolic compensation. People will replace decision-making with rituals that feel meaningful. They will collect feathers and photos as moral receipts. To counter this, I recommend an evidence ledger. For every sign you catalog, also write the concrete action you took in the same moment. Over time, you will see whether signs correlate with good actions or merely comforted avoidance. Now, some architecture for relationships. Many clients use the ritual of the unsignaled decision to test romantic choices. I advise a 2-tier test. Tier 1 is safety and dignity. Can boundaries be set and respected in a month? Tier 2 is compatibility expressed in competence. Do you and your partner solve problems together? A rainbow does not evidence either. Boundaries and problem-solving do. Use a 2-week boundary experiment as your micro loop. State the boundary, observe the response, evaluate in 7 days. Finance needs stricter rules. Money compounds both wealth and error. For financial moves, I use a 100% clarity rule. Before any investment above a threshold set by you, write a 2-paragraph plan. Why, how, exit conditions, and what skill you will build by doing this. No plan, no invest. Then time box the decision for 72 hours minimum. This slows ritualized rushes. I also recommend a loss protocol. Decide before you act what you will do if the move fails. That reduces anxiety-driven escalation. If your plan says limit loss to 20% in 4 weeks, you will be less susceptible to chasing the recovery in mystical groups. The ritual of unsignaled decision interacts with identity. You cannot test forever and still be the person who waits for the universe. So add daily affirmations that are practical. I tell clients to say, "I am someone who chooses and learns." Repeat it 3 times before the small action. The nervous system hears the phrase and begins the slow work of identity retraining. We need also to rewire social reinforcement. If your friends celebrate your sign reading, you will get social reward for avoidance. Replace that by changing the story you share. Instead of telling the feather story, tell the micro-experiment story. I reached out to that company and offered 90 minutes of work. They responded, "I'm testing how it goes." The story shifts social currency from meaning to method. There will be backsliding. Humans love slow return to familiar false comforts. Prepare for it. I ask every client to name 3 relapse signs: compulsive checking of clocks, lengthening interpretation sessions, or joining an interpretation chat group. When you see a relapse sign, treat it like a weather warning. Execute a pre-planned safe step. 2 days of competence calendar, a conversation with your accountability witness, and no decisions for 48 hours. Finally, let me give you scripts you can use right now. If you feel the pull to interpret a coincidence into action, speak. "I notice I'm seeking a sign." I will wait 72 hours and run a test instead. If someone offers you spiritual confirmation to make a risky move, reply, "Thank you. I'm doing a small experiment first. If results are good, I'll consider scaling." If you're tempted to stay in a harmful relationship because of a sign, say to yourself, "A sign is not a guarantee of safety. I will create a safety check and then reassess." These scripts are small. They are not inspirational. They are tactical. They work because they remove the brain's need for dramatization and replace it with procedure. I will not pretend this is painless. New habits feel awkward. Your social world might push back. You will meet guilt at the doorway. That guilt is the emotional rent you pay to buy a different life. Accept the bill. Pay it with small experiments. The next section will show you what this practice looks like when it begins to change outcomes. If you actually do this, you will see small, visible shifts. The question is whether you will hold the practice long enough to let those shifts accumulate. And after you have run the first loops and felt the first friction and a wet, slow joy at having acted without a cosmic thumbs up, you'll want to know what the next month looks like. In the next part 1 will show the future that begins to form when the ritual is repeated. I will trace the daily micro changes, the small wins, and the quiet dismantling of old identity. I will describe the exact moments when the nested narrative shifts from "I wait for signs" to "I create evidence." That is where things stop being theoretical and start paying rent. Stay there with me for the next piece. Change is not a single event. It is a cluster of tiny decisions stacked over time until gravity moves. When the decision micro-loop and the ritual of unsignaled decision become habits, your days begin to rearrange. First, you notice fewer interruptions. The urge to scan for repeating numbers loses urgency. You still see coincidences. You no longer let them valet your choices. The space freed by fewer interpretive rituals will be filled by work you actually do. I want you to picture a 6-week window. Week 1 is awkward. You stumble. You forget the script. You feel the old lure. Week 2, you do the ritual 3 times, and 1 experiment yields feedback. Week 3, you keep a 90-minute block for skill work. Week 4, a client pays you $300 for a small deliverable. Week 5, you use that money to buy a book and a course. Week 6, you feel a small reserve. It is not dramatic. It is durable. Let me show you concrete scenes. Scene 1. Morning. You used to check the clock for mirrored times. Now you check a brief to-do list and open a document. Your breath is different. That difference is measurable. It shows as 30 minutes of work a day saved from ritual into production. Scene 2. A relationship argument. Previously you would fight, wait, scan the sky for a sign to decide. Now you enact a boundary experiment. 1 week of explicit expectations. Your partner responds. The response is data. You decide. You either repair or leave. Notice how clarity replaces long seasons of waiting. Scene 3. Money. Before, you would get caught in phones and groups promising spiritual confirmation for investments. Now you write a 2-paragraph plan before any move. You share it with a witness. You cap the exposure. You sleep. You do not wake in a panic at 3:33 a.m. The sleep alone is a form of interest gained. Amanda is an example I return to. She had a decade of ritualized waiting. She learned the ritual of unsignaled decision on a Tuesday and used it first on a small career offer. She sat. She wrote 1 sentence. She committed to 7 days. She did the work. She landed the client. And 3 months later the client offered a longer contract. The details are not heroic. The point is repetition. Amanda rebuilt competence by choosing and testing. Her sense of being in tune was replaced by the feeling of being effective. Raphael's story is a different arc. He used to trade on hunches and signs in the market. After the ritual, he disciplined 1 decision. Commit to weekly reading and 1 small, documented trade with a pre-specified stop loss. He lost money on the first trade. He logged the mistake without spinning into superstition. He adjusted speed, learned financial language, and grew a reserve. In a year, his capital was modest but resilient. The world responded to his evidence, not his prayers. These examples are not exceptional. They are the predictable, small, consistent actions compound unpredictably. Suppose you move 90 minutes a day into skill development for a year. You do the math. 90 minutes times 5 days equals 7. 5 hours a week. In 40 weeks, that is 300 hours. 300 hours of focused, deliberate practice on a specific skill will move you from beginner to useful. That utility transforms how the market compensates you. The future also includes ritual economy repair. People who once sold clearer signs will lose market share to those who sell methods. You become less likely to fall prey to charlatans because you will now ask for deliverables rather than promises. You will ask for a refund or a clear roadmap rather than interpretive opacity. This simple shift blocks many predators. However, the new pattern is fragile for a while. Old cravings resurface during stress. The brain rewards symbolic comfort fast. You will need to maintain the practice of small experiments because the system will test your commitment. Expect relapses into sign hunting at stressful moments, sickness, loneliness, market dips. Your job is to respond with the unglamorous routine you promised yourself in the beginning. Forgiveness is a necessary lever here. The past years you spent waiting are true. They are also reversible in the same way habits change, through repetition. Forgiveness helps you avoid turning shame into paralysis. Use shame as data. Use forgiveness as the fuel to get back to work. The sentence I ask clients to repeat is simple. I wasted time. Now I will practice. Repeat it until action follows. You will also face the temptation to overcorrect. Some people swing from ritual to hyper-rationality and lose nuance. I warn against turning every gut feeling into a spreadsheet. The aim is not to kill mystery. The aim is to stop making major life decisions on the basis of momentary emotional noise. Keep pockets of wonder. Do not let method sterilize joy. Another important shift is identity. When you consistently choose, your self-narrative changes. The phrase, "I am a person who waits for the universe," becomes inaccurate. It feels like a small semantic change, but identity is the chair your attention sits on. Change the chair, and the views you entertain alter accordingly. A practical sign that the future is taking shape. You will have a list of small wins. They are not shareable stories of fate. They are receipts. A contract signed. A client paid. A relationship boundary maintained. A reduced overdraft. Each receipt is a unit of proof. Collect them. Put them in a folder. When the old voice whispers about past mistakes, open the folder and read the evidence. Let's talk about relationships in this future. People who once stayed because of signs now stay because of consistent reciprocity. They ask not, "Will the universe show me?" but "Do my needs get met?" They test for patterns of respect over months, not for single symbolic events. This is less poetic, but far more humane. If you do this, you will slowly attract partners who are also builders, not actors. On finances, the future alternative looks like a lower burn from anxiety-driven purchases. Previously, emotional vacuums were filled by purchasing spiritual courses or clear signals from paid groups. Now those funds fund learning and reserves. The ledger becomes nutritious. Money becomes evidence of increasingly competent decisions rather than proof of external alignment. Professionally, the future is quieter but steadier. Where you once hoped to be chosen, you now position yourself to be useful. That usefulness begets offers. It is mundane. It accumulates dignity. Dignity solves a lot of the problems that signs pretended to fix. You will also notice a change in conversation. Instead of recounting a miracle story, you will tell a mini case. The experiment, the steps, the result. People who once admired your sensitivity will admire your output. The social currency shifts. That change is often accompanied by the relief of no longer needing to dramatize every event to feel interesting. This future is not moral superiority. It is craft. The long arc favors practice. The point is not to eliminate mystery. It is to stop using mystery as an excuse for inaction. If you are thinking, but what about intuition? How do I keep that? The answer is in the method. Act. Watch the feedback. If the same quiet signal that moved you also produces better results, you will notice consistency. Intuition that guides competence will survive. Intuition that just soothes you will lose authority. This future will ask for patience. The brain will crave drama. The world will remain unpredictable. But when you act as a maker rather than an interpreter, your life begins to tilt toward resilience. Opportunities that used to pass by unnoticed are now visible because you have the tools to convert them into results. So what does the next month look like if you adopt this? It looks like small bets. It looks like a sequence of tiny wins and small adjustments. It looks like less panic at 3:33 a.m. It looks like quiet competence replacing public stories of alignment. It looks like a gradual increase in options. It looks like dignity arriving not as a signal, but as a consequence. In the next section, I will close the arc. I will mirror what you might be feeling. I will lay out a micro action you can take today that is impossible to misinterpret as spiritual bypass. I will give you the minimal, unambiguous next step that separates storytelling from practice. That is the choice you will have to make. Are you ready to claim it? You have heard the pattern. You have seen the mechanics. Now decide if you will be a person who chooses evidence over spectacle. Let me summarize the thesis in plain language. People who see signs in everything have trained a feedback loop. Indecision creates anxiety. Anxiety breeds pattern searching. Pattern searching produces permission. Permission substitutes for competence. The habit becomes identity. Identity organizes attention. The world then responds by giving outcomes that match that posture. It is coherent. It is not mystical. It is brutal. If you recognize yourself in that loop, do not collapse into self-recrimination. That is exactly the detour it wants you to take. Instead, do one simple thing today. Pick one small decision you have been delaying. Use the ritual of unsignaled decision. Sit 3 minutes. Ask, if I were 100% responsible, what would I do? Write one sentence. Act within 48 hours. Tell a witness. Report back in 7 days. This is not soft advice. It is an experiment with built-in accountability. It is the minimum action that breaks the habit of outsourcing your choices. Now, a few direct questions. Do you feel the urge to catalog the signs before acting? Then you are in the old pattern. Can you name one skill you want to build this month? If not, your attention is likely being drained by symbolic rituals. Will you make one small public commitment now? If not, you are still using isolation to preserve avoidance. I will give you a short script to repeat until it becomes automatic. I choose and I learn. Say it aloud 3 times. Then do a small, visible thing. The phrase trains identity. The action trains reality. You will need to forgive yourself. Forgiveness is not sentimental. It clears space for work. Say, I forgive myself for the years I waited. I will act now. That phrase is pragmatic. It is a reset, not an excuse. Expect resistance. Shame will arrive. So will friends who prefer your old stories. That is normal. Your job is to keep doing the small experiments. Keep the competence calendar. Keep the decision micro-loop. The nervous system will recalibrate. There are practical guardrails I want you to adopt immediately. First, set a financial rule. No investment above your threshold without a written plan and a witness. Second, set a relationship rule. 1 month of boundary testing before a long-term decision. Third, set a career rule. 3 90-minute focus sessions per week for skill building. These rules are prosaic. They are also preventive medicine. If you want the ritual now, write this down. 3 minutes of stillness, 1 sentence of responsibility, 1 small action in 48 hours, 1 public check-in in 7 days. Then do it. Many will answer, this is too hard. I like the comfort of signs. I will be blunt. Comfort without competence compounds into poverty of many kinds: financial, relational, and existential. You will trade short-term comfort for long-term scarcity. That is the real cost of spiritual bypass masquerading as faith. If you persist with the old pattern, you will get predictable results. Opportunities will accumulate as regret. Learn. That is how the universe begins to answer in ways that matter.